Today we begin that section on the Bhagavad-Geeta, which deals with the yoga of the divine, how one can directly connect with the divine. In the first text of chapter 7, Krishna states, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Mai asakta manah partha yogam yunjan madashrayah asamshayam samagram mam yatha gnasyasi tachrinu. Now hear, O son of Partha, that's Arjun, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So Krishna is beginning that section of the Bhagavad Gita where he is talking about union with the divine. That is union with Krishna. Jnanam te aham sa vijnanam idam vakshyami asheshata yaj gnatva neha bhuyo anyaj gnatavyam avashishyate. I shall declare to you this knowledge. What knowledge? Jnanam and vijnanam. What is the difference between jnanam and ajnanam? Jnanam is declarative knowledge. It is didactic knowledge. It is knowledge that is given to you in the terms of somebody speaking knowledge to you, or you're reading knowledge from a book. That is called jnanam. What is vijnanam? Vijnanam is the result of your own pondering over this knowledge until it becomes realization. In the Upanishads, it has been described that there are three levels. One is called Shravanam, which is where one hears. Number two, it's called Mananam, which is one thinks, one carries it in the mind, and it dwells in your intellect where you discuss it, you study it. And lastly, it says Nididhyasanam. Nididhyasanam means you now meditate on this truth which you have gathered from hearing and thinking, and this Nididhyasanam is called, results in what is called Vijnanam. So Jnanam is received knowledge in the terms of Shravanam. The same knowledge then becomes yours when you think about it, Mananam. And ultimately, you realize that knowledge through Nididhyasanam, which is through meditation. And Krishna says, having known this, yaj gnatva neha bhuyo, anyaj gnatvayam avashishyate. After this, there will be nothing more to be known. When I declare this knowledge to you and you have both heard it, meditated on it, and then realized it, there will be nothing more to be known. Yet Krishna cautions that everybody is not able to access this knowledge. This yoga of the divine person is not easily realized. In text 3 of chapter 7, Lord Krishna states, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye Yatatam api siddhanam kaschin mam veti tatvatah. Out of many thousands among men may struggle for perfection. And of those who attain that perfection, hardly one will know me in truth. So there are several levels of realization. One level of realization is that you transcend the ahankar, you transcend the ego, you truly transcend this idea of I, me, and myself. This idea of I, me, and myself is the barrier to self realization. When you transcend this idea of I, me, and myself, then you are truly at a place where you are self realized. When you realize that you are nothing. In practical terms, it is nothing. But in theoretical terms, you may say that you have realized Brahman, because Brahman is that which is non-material. Hence, it is ineffable. It cannot be described in words. And you cannot speak of it. And as far as you are concerned, or the other people talking to you are concerned, it is nothing. Therefore, self-realization means you realize you are nothing. This is the first stage. This is called perfection. And when you reach this first stage, which is called perfection, which is called Brahma Bhut, then you are given the opportunity by God to develop Parabhakti. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kangshati samah sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. So when this individual who has now become a non-individual because he has realized he is nothing, this person is given the vision of the divine person. And when he engages in the worship of this divine person without any sense of self, this is known as Parabhakti. Sarve upadhi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam rishikesha rishikena sevanam bhakti ruchyate. When you have been stripped of all designations, sarve upadhi, when you have been stripped of them, vinirmuktam, tat paratvena nirmalam, you have become flawless because there is no I, me, and myself. You are nothing. Then, when you serve Bhagavan, the Lord of the senses, Rishikesh, and you serve him with your senses, then he says, this is called Parabhakti. So, there are people who aspire for God realization, they achieve self realization, and having achieved self realization, they think that's it. Now I am the cat's whiskers. Now I have reached. You have not reached at that level, you have only started at that level. This is the starting point. That is the starting point of the spiritual life. When you realize that you are Brahman, when you realize that you are nothing. And that starting point leads to the worship of the Supreme Lord. And what happens to those who do not worship the Supreme Lord when they have attained the state of perfection or nothingness of Brahman? The Bhagavad describes, Ye anya aravindaksha vimukta manina stvai ashtabhavada vishuddha buddhaya aruya krichrena parampada tatah patanti adho anadritam yusmadangraya. So Brahma is speaking to the Lord and he says that, O Lord, O lotus-eyed one, there are many who imagine that they have reached that place of perfection by performing great austerities. But having performed those great austerities and reached what they call as the Parampada, which is Brahman realization, they do not take shelter of your lotus feet. They do not engage in parabhakti. And because they do not engage in parabhakti, this idea of I, me, myself slowly begins to creep back into them. And this ahankar again takes over. So it doesn't matter whether you're in regular life or whether you're in orange robes. If you do not engage in parabhakti, which is remembering God and forgetting self, having forgotten self, you engage in remembering God, then not remembering God, not taking shelter of his lotus feet, means that you again fall back into material consciousness. Therefore, Krishna here in this third text of the seventh chapter points out that many people out of thousands, hardly one will seek perfection to reach that stage of Brahman realization. And of those who realize Brahman, hardly one, he says, will engage in the worship of the Supreme Lord in person. And those who do not do so will fall back again into material consciousness. And now Krishna describes that we are made of two types of energies. The two types of energies that we are made up of is Prakriti and Purush. To learn more about Prakriti and Purush, you need to go to 14th chapter, 3rd text. In the 14th chapter, 3rd and 4th text, Krishna describes how this takes place. Krishna is the source of two energies. One energy is his inferior energies, his Bhinna Prakriti, and the other is his superior energy. Prakritim Vidhi Me Param. The inferior energy is Prakriti, material nature, and the superior energy is Purush. And in the third text of the 14th chapter, Krishna declares, Mama yonir mahad brahma tasmin garbham dadamyaham sambhava sarvabhutanam tato bhavati bharatah. Now this has been mistranslated regardless of which edition of Bhagavad-Gita you have or who is the author or translator. Mahad means the composite of Prakriti. When Prakriti is unexpressed, inchoate, that Prakriti is known as Mahat. It is a totality of Prakriti. That's called Mahat. So here he says that my womb is the Mahat. Mahat Brahma is my womb. And I impregnate it. Tasmin garbham dadhamyaham. And I impregnate it, I create within it. Sambhava sarva bhutanam tato bhavati bharata. And within this Mahat, which is the totality of unexpressed Prakriti, I impregnate and manifest all living entities. Sarva yoneshu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti yaha. This is text 4, chapter 14. Sarva yoneshu kaunteya murtaya sambhavanti yaha. Tasham brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradah pitah. So I impregnate this Mahat with my superior energy. And when I impregnate this Mahat with my superior energy, Many, many infinitesimal, minute Purushas enveloped with Prakriti are created. And these composite creations, the individual Purush, the infinitesimal individual Purush surrounded by an envelope of Prakriti, he becomes one creature. And thus millions of creatures are formed. And Krishna says, I am the seed giving father. So when you understand the 14th chapter, these verses, then you can come back to the 7th chapter, 4th verse. And there he describes what Prakriti is. Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhireva cha ahankara ityam me bhinna prakriti ashtada. So earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these eight are my separated inferior energies. So this Prakriti, Krishna explains, is earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. In short, everything that you can see, smell, hear, taste, touch, everything that you are materially in terms of body, mind, intelligence, your sense of self, all of these are your Prakriti. But you are beyond these. You are beyond the I. You are beyond the ahankar. You are beyond the sense of self. You are beyond the mind, beyond the intelligence. Indeed, you are beyond this physical body. And in chapter 7, text 5, he states, Aparyamitastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahamahao yedam dharyate jagat. Besides this inferior separated energy, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is also a superior energy of mine, which are all living entities who are struggling with material nature and are sustaining the universe. So, aside from this Prakriti, which you see, smell, hear, taste, touch, aside from this Prakriti, which forms your body and your mind and your intelligence, there is a superior energy which is you. You are the soul. That soul is the infinitesimal Purush. And to understand that, I want you to go to that verse which says, Mamaivanso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastendriyani prakriti sthani karshati. This is in text 15.7. And when you go to 15.7, you will realize that this Purush, which is part of God, which has impregnated Prakriti, is nothing but a fragment, an infinitesimal fragment of the Lord. Therefore, Krishna says, Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke, you are a fragment of this, of me. And yet you are eternal. And with your struggling with your Prakriti, the inferior energy, you're struggling with your mind, you're struggling with your intelligence, you're struggling with your ego, because this is your nature. Your nature is to be the soul, not to be Prakriti. Although you are enveloped with Prakriti, you are the spirit, you are the soul, you are the infinitesimal Prakriti, Mamayo Jiva Loke. And that is what Krishna speaks of when Krishna speaks in the 7th chapter, in the 5th verse, where he says, Aparayam itastvanyam. There's yet another. Prakritim vidhi me param. You are part of my superior energy. You are the soul. You are not Prakriti, you are not nature, you are the soul. And this soul is struggling with Prakriti, including your own Prakriti, of your mind, intelligence, and ego, your body also. Yet, Krishna explains that he is the source of both Purush and Prakriti. Not only is he the Supreme Purush, but he is the source of the Supreme Purush and the Prakriti. एतद् योनिनि भूतानि सर्वानिति उपधारय अहम कृत्स्नाय जगतः प्रभाव प्रलयस्तथा. Indeed, of all that is material, Prakriti, and spiritual, Purush, in this world, know for certain that I am both its origin and I am its dissolution. So Krishna is the source of Prakriti, he is the source of Purush. मतः परत्रम नान्यात् किंचिदस्ति धनंजय मयि सर्वम इदम प्रोतम सूत्रे मणिगण इव. O Arjuna, O conqueror of wealth, there is no truth superior to me. There is nothing beyond me. There is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me, just as pearls are strung upon a thread. So you think that Brahman is the supreme? Then you should go to Bhagawad-Geeta, 14th chapter, 27th verse. And in that 7th chapter, in the 14th chapter, 27th verse, Krishna declares the same thing that he has declared in the last two verses I quoted. In 14.27, Krishna declares, Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya avyayasya cha शाश्वतस्य च धर्मस्य सुखस्य ऐकांतिकस्य च. Krishna says, I, Krishna, the person, am the source of Brahman, the all-pervading, which is immortal, imperishable, eternal, and is the constitutional position of ultimate happiness. I am the source, I am the rest, I am the support, I am the origin of Brahman. Elsewhere, I quoted earlier from the Bhagavad Puran, Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yaj jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwaniti shabdyate. God is realized in three ascending levels of realization. He is realized as Brahman, he is realized as Paramatma, and he is realized as Bhagavan. Imagine that you are sleeping at night in your room, and when you wake up in the morning, the sunlight enters your room from your window that faces east. And you say, ah, the sun has entered my room. Yes, the sun has entered your room, but it has entered your room in the form of sunlight, which is all pervading. Similarly, Brahman is akin to that sunlight. It is the all-pervading energy of God, of which you are a particle. Aham Brahmasmi. I am a particle of that all-pervading energy of God. Sarva Khalva Idam Brahma. Everything is made of Brahman, which is the all-pervading. So Purush and Prakriti both are part of Brahman. And the source of that Brahman is Bhagavan, Krishna. I'm repeating it again for you. First, there is Purush and there is Prakriti, the supreme soul and the composite of total material nature, unexpressed. And of this Purush, which is the supreme soul, the individual souls are created because the supreme soul impregnates Mahat, which is the totality of unexpressed Prakriti. And thus emerges from this Prakriti millions of small, infinitesimal Purushas who are covered by an envelope of Prakriti. And because they are so small, they are struggling with their own Prakriti of mind and senses. Mamaivanso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana mana shastendriyani prakritisthani karshati. And they are composed of two parts. One is the material part. Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham mano buddhirevacha ahankara itya me bhinna prakriti ashtada. They are also composed of that mamai vamso jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. They are infinitesimal parts of the Supreme Purush. Aparayam itastvanyam prakritim vidhi me param jiva bhutam mahabhao yayedam dharyate jagat. And both this Purush and Prakriti are part of Brahman. And what is the source of Brahman? What is the support of Brahman? What is the origin of Brahman? What is that upon which Brahman rests? Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyayasya cha shashvatasya cha dharmasya sukhasya aikantikasya cha. Krishna says, I, Krishna, am the source of this Brahman. So just like the sun in the sky is the source of this sunlight which pervades your room, so also Krishna is the source of Brahman. Similarly, if you look into a mirror in your room which faces the window, you could see in that mirror an image of the sun. And you say, ah, there's the sun. That's only an image of the sun. So also, as in the 6th chapter described, if you look within your heart, you will find that within your heart there is an image of God. And that image of God is called Paramatma. More of that will be seen in the 15th and other chapters. So the Jnani realizes Brahman, the Dhyan Yogi realizes Paramatma, and the Bhakta realizes Bhagavan. This is very, very important. These are the different stages that you will realize in your journey to reunion with God. Pavakad Vispulingaha. Pavakad Vispulinga is described in the Upanishads, Ndukya Upanishad. God is the fire, we are the sparks from that fire. And the smoke from that fire is Prakriti. Those individual sparks who get lost in the smoke, they get locked into karmic patterns that lead to repeated cycles of birth and death. Those sparks that separate themselves from that smoke and go back into the flames. They have taken the path of yoga, and thus they are reuniting with God. If you get entangled further with Prakriti, that is karma. If you go back to the Lord, that is the sparks go back to the fire, that is known as yoga. So with this, I will conclude today's session. And if anyone has any queries or questions, you are welcome to ask me.
Namaste, Shantanu ji. Thank you so much for today's session. My first question is, how can the divine yoga help one in overcoming stress, anxiety, and material attachments?
Krishna says very clearly that you are struggling with your mind and your senses. You're struggling with your mind, your intelligence, your ego, your senses. You're struggling with them. And you're struggling with Prakriti basically, because you're very small and Prakriti is very powerful. But Krishna says, Daiviya sagunamai mama maya duratyaya mameva ye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. But Krishna says, don't struggle with Prakriti. You surrender unto me, and I will help you to cross over Prakriti. I will help you to transcend Prakriti. So troubles may come, miseries may come, sorrows may come, heartbreak may come, career problems may come, educational difficulties may come, problems in relationships may come. But if you have surrendered to God, they will all wash off you, just like water from a duck's back, just like water on a lotus leaf. Padma patram yuvambasi. You will remain untouched by Prakriti. Because everything in the world happens by the grace of God. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says, Tena vina tranamapina chalati. Not a blade of grass moves without God's consent. So instead of struggling with Prakriti, surrender to God and God will help you to cross beyond Prakriti. Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasya matpara. Buddhi yogam upashrita matchitta satatam bhava. Matchitta sarva durgani mat prasada tarishyasi. Atho chetam ahankaran nasroshasi vinamshasi. Always think of me, surrender unto me, be united with me. By my grace, you will cross over all suffering and all pain and all obstacles in your life. But if you think that you are doing it, then everything is finished. So by remembering God and forgetting the sense of self or ego or ahankar, you will protect yourself. You will become invulnerable to the miseries of life. The slings and arrows of misfortune will not touch you.
My second question to you, Shantuji, is how can one integrate the teachings of the yoga of the divine into daily life?
Pardon?
How can one integrate the teachings of the divine yoga into daily life?
As I've explained to you earlier, and I'm repeating it again, you have time where you work and have time for your duties, and you have time for your sadhana or your spiritual discipline. Your duties, I suggest, are given priority, whether they are your work duties or whether they are your family duties. Whatever responsibilities you have in the world, you give priority. But you do it as a sacrifice and offering to God. Om Tat Sat. God, this is for you. Krishna, this is for you. Without expecting anything in return, do all your duties. Your work should be paramount and it should be perfect. And in the discretionary time that you have, I have suggested that you do 2 hours of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the morning and 2 hours of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the evening. And you will become very soon attuned to God. Everything that you do, everything that you eat, everything that you offer, everything that you give away, do it for Krishna. Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat juhosi dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurusham adarpanam. So whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities you perform, everything do it for Krishna. And thus being single-mindedly attached to Krishna, you will soon find that Shubha Ashubha Falaireva Moksha se Karma Bandhane Sannyasa Yoga Yuktena Vimukto Mami Vaishyasi. Very soon you will realize that you will cross over all obstacles in life. All difficulties will pass you by, and you will attain success in the world, and you will attain union with God in the next. And in this world, you will be united with Him and you will be free from suffering.
Thank you so much for today's enlightening session, Shantuji. It was quite a wonderful session. And for all our viewers, if you liked it too, then don't forget to share this video with your loved ones. Also, stay tuned with us as we meet again on next Thursday at 8 a.m. for yet another session on the Bhagavad Gita. Hare
Hari
Krishna.
Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.